Hello and welcome to another episode of Zealous Talks. I'm your host Kinjal, and today's episode is all about time management and productivity hacks for software engineers. For the same, we have a special guest with us who brings a wealth of experience from the technology industry. He's a principal software engineer manager at Microsoft and has been in the industry for more than 15 years. Please welcome Nick to the show. Welcome, Nick.
Hello, how are you?
Nick, please let our audience know a bit about yourself.
For sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a principal software engineering manager at Microsoft. And right now I manage two deployment teams at Microsoft on the Office 365 side of the organization. So the deployment teams that I manage are responsible for ensuring that all of our partner teams that are building all of the services that people use for things like Outlook on the web, Office on the web, all of those changes and product updates get rolled out to machines in our data centers. So that's what I've been doing for the past few years at Microsoft. And prior to that, I spent about 8 years working in digital forensic software. So a completely different space, but also super exciting.
That's amazing. So, well, we all understand, be it any field, time is valuable, especially for software engineers. You must have experienced it, right? So, and even, yeah.
Absolutely.
And when you're working on tight deadlines and complex projects, it's very important. So today, I'd like to let our audience know Nick will help us explore the foundation of time management and its true value. He'll reveal some common time wasting activities and give us effective techniques for time management strategies. So, Nick, let's jump to the first segment of our podcast, that is the foundation of time management. To begin with it, we would like to know, how do you perceive the value of time in context of software engineering?
For sure. Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, time management is incredibly important in software engineering. I think for a lot of individuals, especially getting into software engineering, there's such a focus on technical skills, how to code things. Like people are very focused on getting ready for their interviews, right? Like it's all these technical things, but time management's critical because it's really how we're going to be effective when it comes to working on the job. So you might be able to have all of this technical knowledge, but if you're not able to schedule your time properly and get the best use out of your time, you're going to have a lot of challenges being able to deliver on your work. So for me, I think one of the primary things that I like to think about with time management and software engineering is getting into what we call like a flow state. And it's, the way we look at flow state is getting into a mindset where it's almost like as you're thinking about your problem solving and stuff, like it's kind of like as you think it, it's coming out of your hands. And if you're coding, you're coding your thoughts like on the fly, or if you're designing something, you just feel like you're very in tune with your thoughts. So for me, a lot of my goals with managing teams are trying to ensure that they can have as much time to be able to get into flow state. But with software engineering, there's so many things that can come up and interrupt us and prevent being able to have that flow state. So managing distractions and things like that, I think are very critical for us to look at. And the other thing that I would mention is that as much as we want to be able to get into flow state, when it comes to time management, the other aspect to this is being able to communicate with our stakeholders within teams. So as a software engineer, if you're working with either other team members, it could be product or project managers, your own manager, having an understanding of like the progress of things and estimations. As much as I'm not a huge fan of estimations, I think people just really like to know how things are progressing at a minimum. So that's like sort of in a nutshell how I look at time management and software engineering.
Oh, all right. So, can you share some common time wasting activities that developers should be mindful of?
Yes, for sure. So I would try to take some notes on this because I think it's a really interesting question, and the
Yeah.
probably the most I would say common one that I see, it's very generic, but the most common one that I see is context switching. And this is something that happens like not even in software engineering. I think so many of us are used to trying to multitask in our lives, and and that just carries over into work, right? So, we'll
Right.
have, so most developers will have their email, they'll have some type of internal chat, they'll have the code they're working on, they'll have pull requests that they need to review, they might have systems that they're monitoring. Like you have all of these things going on all the time, and often it's not even just those things. You have maybe several features or bug fixes you're working on at the same time, or multiple pull requests you have to jump between. So there are so many opportunities to be focused on different things at the same time. And when we context switch, I've heard a stat, I think, with respect to meetings before, that when you have to context switch, say for a meeting,
Hmm.
you might be wasting upwards to like 20 minutes before the meeting and 20 minutes after.
Right.
So if you apply that in general to context switching, you lose so much time just for doing that.
Right. When we are talking about the context or we talk about goal setting, right, in time management. So, can you let us know why is it important to set goals when coding?
Why, sorry, what, how to set or why to set,
It's like, why is it
or both?
important? Yeah.
Why are they important? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think in general, when it comes to setting goals, the idea is sort of like an agreed upon state that you want to end up at, right? Right. And I do feel that when if you're working through something, so
Hmm.
let's say if with respect to code, if it's a bug fix, or it's a feature. Sometimes like bug fixes might be a little bit more obvious for what the goal of that is, but that's the end state. But there's a couple of things that go into setting goals. And like one of them is going to be what is the desired end state? And another part of goal setting is really about, like sort of a time component to that. So you might have things that you're working on, and just to get, I'll make up a totally contrived example. If you had to work on a feature for a user interface, if you only were focused on the tangible deliverables to code up and you created this change in the user interface, but it took you 2 months to do it, like, is that goal accomplished? Like,
Hmm.
maybe not, depending on what like you and the stakeholders had agreed upon. So having this time component is essential because it will help scope the type of work that you need to do. So just to add on to that, if you're working with your stakeholder as a software engineer
Right.
and you're talking about what has to be delivered, if they're asking for things in particular and you're going back and forth to agree upon a time, and this is part of the goal setting part, if you're trying to agree upon how much time is involved for something like that,
Hmm.
you're having this opportunity to level set expectations with your stakeholders. So if they're saying, hey, we need this feature to do X, Y, and Z, and we need it done in a week, 2 weeks, whatever the time happens to be, when it comes to you goal setting from the software engineering side, like you need to be able to have that conversation back with them and try to understand what's realistic, what's going to be taking you the majority of that time. And I think being able to align on that and set goals properly ensures that both you as the software engineer and the stakeholder have clear expectations about what's going to be delivered.
Right. So I feel that clear goal helps you have clear strategies and it saves a lot of time. Right. So when we
That's right.
talking about there are so many things to do. Everybody tries to be a multitasker, right? So how do
That's
you
right.
decide what to work on first when you've got a lot on your plate?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very challenging to do properly.
right.
And I think that something as a software engineering manager, what I try to do is make sure that within a team we have the same sets of values and priorities. So I would, as much as possible, like to make sure that anyone on the team at any given point understands, like in an abstract way at least, what is the most high priority thing. So they should have visibility into some type of, like, let's call it a backlog, for just to be generic here, but some backlog of work that we have. If they understand things that we value, the top priorities that we've discussed in general, if they are trying to make a decision about what's a high priority thing to do next, I would love for my team to be able to do that like have the skills and the resources to be able to do that on their own. Now, I don't encourage that all of the time people are doing things on their own, but I like to make sure that they're enabled to do it. Now, if someone is looking for the next high priority thing, I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together and have a conversation about it. But that means, like I said, we need to have alignment on values because as we have requests coming in from different sources, whether
Right.
it's a product owner, whether so that could be a product manager, it could be it could be me as the product owner, but we have requests coming in. The product owners could be from partner teams. It could be escalations from security, tech support. All of these different places can have things that are it feels like they're interrupting the work that we want to be doing, for lack of a better word. And it's really up to, me ultimately as the engineering manager, at least in the organizations that I've worked in, it kind of falls back to me that
Hmm.
I need to make sure that I can prioritize these things. But like I said, it will come back to having a set of values that we're aligned on as a team. So for me, just to give you a brief example, like I like coming back to a team charter. So we think about like what is the purpose of our team existing, right?
Right.
So for me right now, I manage two deployment teams. Part of our charter is to ensure that we can and like have all of our partner teams deploy their changes for their services in a safe and quick manner, right? We want to make sure everything's safe all of the time. So we go as fast as possible without compromising safety. So for me, when I have work coming in and I need to think about prioritizing that, I need to make sure that we're we're aligning our work to those goals, and at the same time, I need to balance that with things like what kind of technical debt do we have coming up from the team? What type of security issues do we have coming up? But again, that's my perspective. And as a software engineer on the team, I would say that if individuals don't have that type of sort of exposure to what the priorities are, you don't have clear alignment either with your manager or the product owner. I think it's a great opportunity to ask questions about that type of thing so that you can have that clarity and have that alignment and have the conversations to understand what is the next priority.
Right. What I take from it, like it's if we have a clear goal, we can set priorities. Like which one is the high priority, which one is not, and then we can divide it according to that, right? So
That's right. And things will change too. And I think
yeah.
that's normal in software engineering. So uh, it's interesting, right? I think if you go into, say you're doing sprints in your development process, you might go into that with a set of priorities, and then
Hmm.
inevitably something comes up. But the the reason I always fall back to like what is our team value is that if
What's
we're
the
having a
purpose?
difficult time. Yes, if we're having a
Right.
difficult time trying to prioritize, we can make a decision based on our values.
Okay. So when we talk about that, do agile approach helps? I've been reading a lot on that. So is it a yes or no from you?
For agile,
Yeah.
I so it's yes and no. The and I'll share a little bit. I think I think the spirit of what agile is, I like. Um so it's a yes for me in regards to like people over process and that kind of thing. I like the idea of truly being agile, trying to be dynamic and ensuring that you can pivot and be nimble. I like using the word nimble now. Um, and the reason I say that is because I hear a lot of different places talking about agile processes,
Yes.
but they're talking about agile processes. And they start to say, well, agile prescribes we do. I'm just going to kind of make this up, but they, prescribes we do Scrum or we have to do Kanban. And if we do one of these things, here's the rules for it. And then they start putting in place these rules and these processes. And I feel that and this is just my experience, a lot of the time people stick to those things
Hmm.
adamantly, and then all of a sudden you're not agile.
Oh, that's a paradox, right?
Yeah, so
So,
that's my reason why I end up saying no to agile sometimes, but I think it's the implementation of agile that I see ends up not having agility built into it. And what I like to say instead is continuous improvement, whatever that happens to look like for a given team. So you could start with literally any type of software development process that you want. And I would say make sure that you're working with your team to have some cadence where you reflect on how things are going and try implementing a change. And then from there, try the change out. If it's working, great, keep it. If it's not, the next time you meet and reflect on it, you can drop it and try something else. And I think that if you keep doing that rhythm, you'll eventually find something that works really well for your team. That's my general philosophy that I like to adopt now.
so that's about being flexible, right?
Right. So to me, that brings back true agility, like the way that I like to see it. And the fact that we have things like Scrum and Kanban, extreme programming, what I like is that we have these things that have been modeled for us that we can start to pull things from, right? So just as an example,
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about how we could be more effective with communicating with the other software engineers on our team. Like you could try pair programming. You could try saying, hey, for the next little bit, let's make sure that people are trying to pair program. And then the next time you meet as a team to see how things are going, talk about how the pair programming is working. If that works well for you, great, keep it. And if not, like, okay, maybe try something different instead, but keep experimenting.
Right. Okay. Be flexible and keep experimenting. That's what I take from it. So you have been in this industry for more than 15 years, am I right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So there must be phases where you felt like literal burnout. And
Yes.
yes, and that's frustrate all of us. So are there any signs or stories that taught you how to avoid it?
For sure. I've written a lot about burnout. Some of like my first articles that I was writing online were about burnout, and I I took a very different stance, at least for myself. And I kind of want to share this part first before I
Yeah.
generalize it. But for myself, burnout I feel looked a lot different than kind of what stereotypical burnout might look like.
Mhm.
And I think this is just my opinion. When I see people talking about burnout online and in different, whether it's videos or articles, posts, um, I think that I think that they're accurate in saying like hey, just, to oversimplify it, oh, you're working too much, like you're gonna feel fatigued, you're gonna feel disengaged. Like these are signs of like obvious burnout. And
Right.
the the thing that I experienced was totally inverse to this. And I always go back to my one of my first HR managers, like in my professional career after university. I remember her saying at the startup we were working at, Nick, you're working too much and you're going to burn out. And I remember saying to her, like, I don't like I disagree because I love what I'm doing. Like I come to work, I love what I'm doing. No one makes me work. Like I will go home
Yeah.
and work. I'll work on weekends. Like I just really enjoyed working. And she kept telling me, like, you got to be careful. You're gonna burn out. And I did this for years.
Hmm.
And and I never felt like I was burning out. Right. Like there's gonna be good and bad days, of course, but I was never like, oh my God, I hate working now. Like I need to take time off and I feel disengaged. But what burnout looked like for me was that what I didn't realize, I was trading these other parts of my life for work. And it seems obvious. I just said I was working a lot, but I didn't realize like some of my friendships were starting to lack because my friends were moved away from me and I wasn't making time for them, not making time for family. I was getting social anxiety and I couldn't understand why, but I would go to meet new people and it would be like, well, tell me about yourself. And I didn't have anything to say. I like to work, right? Like suddenly I started to realize that these other aspects of my life just were lacking. So burnout for me wasn't a matter of I'm disengaged from work and I don't like it and I'm getting resentful, it was truly like the rest of my life was kind of was lacking in regards
Falling
to.
apart types. Yeah.
Yeah. So for I would say if you're someone who is had kind of experienced what I was experiencing where you love work and you're working a lot, I would just say kind of think about the things that you truly value. You know, I love the people I work with. I love the mission that we had. So I don't regret it. It would be wrong for me to say I regret it, but I think that I should have been more aware of what was happening outside of work and the impact that it has when you spend so much time working. So I wanted to share that because I feel like a different version of what a lot of people hear generally when it comes to burnout. So that's the first part, but does that kind of make sense? And I know it's a little
Yeah,
unique.
it does. So it's like for you, you love to work, but at the same time, in matter of time, you felt that what about the other aspects of your life, and that maybe fear of missing out from the other aspects of your life made you feel that yeah, you are burning out. You were not actually burning out from your work, but from that FOMO, I guess,
It's
right?
totally correct. Yeah. And so it just looked different for me. Now, when it comes to just regular, what I would call like typical burnout, if there's such a thing to classify it as, certainly there's more obvious signs where you're feeling disengaged, you're feeling lack of motivation, but these types of things can happen, even from day to day. They could happen when you start a project. They could happen if you're on a project a little bit too long, but it can make it tricky to realize when you're burning out versus just having a bad day. But I
Right.
think it's important to periodically reflect. You can keep a log, you can keep, even the most simple thing is keep a draft email with yourself and just take a note once a week about how things were feeling. And
Hmm.
and if you notice that for many, many weeks, like I don't know what the magic number is, right? But say it's been a couple of months or something, and you're like, for 8 weeks now, I have not been enjoying work, right? Like that's not a bad day. That's
That's
you're
like,
starting to
yeah,
have
there's
these
a continuous
issues that
process.
maybe. Yes. So I think that that's, it's more about keeping tabs for yourself about some of these, what I would call, they seem more obvious in hindsight. Like I'm disengaged, I'm feeling resentful. Um, you might have periods, especially if you're working remote and there's lots of distractions where you're like, I I don't like I'm not even ready to open up my laptop and work. Like I'm gonna take a super long lunch today. Like you feel like you want to slack off, not because, I don't know, not because you have other better things to do, but just because you are finding it hard to get into your work rhythm. So I just think it's important to keep tabs on those things.
Right. So let's now move on to the next segment. It's how do you learn new skills while working on different projects?
Yeah, new skills, I think it's definitely situational. So if you're working on projects, I think for me, as an engineering manager working with the engineers on my team, as much as possible, I try to, like, especially when they're switching between projects, like they're wrapping something up and they're
Hmm.
going on to the next one. I try to make an opportunity to ask them and kind of level set expectations with them. Like, what types of challenges are you looking for personally? What types of challenges do we have at work right now?
Hmm.
And like either skill gaps, career advancement opportunities. And I'm saying this as an engineering manager, but I say this because as a software engineer, if you're not having conversations like this, it might be worth trying to bring up with your manager. But I like this opportunity between projects because for me, trying to plan out who's going to be investing time into what, especially at the start of planning something, it means that like at that point we have the most flexibility. So it might mean that I can put someone a little bit more junior into
Hmm.
working on something where they have to build up some skill sets. So on my teams right now, we have a ton of back end work. We have a lot of, complicated deployment systems that we're using. And one of our partner teams, does a lot more of like the user interface work for dashboards, metrics, reporting. And because we don't get a lot of that work in our day to day, I try to make time with that team to say, hey, look, I have a couple of individuals from my team that would love that type of technology exposure. Like, could we try to get them to do some work for you on the side? And I try to give them those opportunities. So I think when you're at work, you may or may not. I think it's worth asking your manager if there's an opportunity to try different things. And if that's really important for you at work and you're not getting it at work, I would just say like consider how important it is, because if you're not able to learn the things that you want and that's something you prioritize, perhaps the role or the team that you're in isn't a great fit. But that's one way that I prioritize that. Does that align? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe that's how you can learn new things and stay updated what is what technology is trending in the market right now. Uh, if you tell your
Yeah,
manager that
and
yeah, I want to try new things, then only you'll get to know new trends and new skills, or else you will be stuck on that one particular thing which will not help you grow, right?
that's right. And if they're technologies and things that are like very new and very flashy, sometimes the other teams aren't even integrating those things yet. Like it's almost too new and flashy for those teams as well. So
Right.
there's other opportunities for that kind of thing at Microsoft, and other companies do this as well, but we have it's almost like a hackathon week, and we do that multiple times a year. Doing that in different ways, I think, is really valuable for engineers. So if you can't make a whole week for it, having a day or an afternoon or something periodically where engineers can say, like, I just want to try building cool things, I think is a great opportunity.
Yeah, even where I am working right now, there is Zealous system. We also have these weekly sessions where we talk about what is going on the market, what is trending, are you guys updated or not? So it's very helpful in that way. And in it goes in
Awesome.
all department, yeah. So also when we are talking about staying updated, what about networking and mentorship? Is like, do they really matter in this career of software engineering? Does networking helps?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. So I would be a little bit hypocritical if I like to talk about mentorship being
Mhm.
like instrumental, because I didn't do it. Unfortunately, I regret it. So I just want to call that out, that I did not go get mentorship. And that's one of the reasons why I put myself into a lot of positions to be a mentor. So I mentor early in career, you know, uh, employees at Microsoft from different teams. I take on other mentors from or mentees, sorry, from other teams. I volunteer at a high school. Like I try to do these things because I think mentorship is super valuable. It's important to find a mentor that aligns with you. So I would encourage any software engineer to go look into that. I think it's helpful. And the networking part is critical. It's it's so valuable. I would say that even for me in a principal engineering manager role, proper networking has allowed me to move between roles at a principal engineering manager level. So being able to network and have different exposure either to different teams, companies, that kind of thing, it'll let you learn new things. It'll let you connect with like-minded people. And you might have these opportunities come up that you just never thought that would be there. So I do recommend as much as possible you try and network.
Right. And to talk about mentorship, it's like it will save a lot of time when you have directly a person to learn from and just by going yourself and learning all different things.
That's right. A good mentor can help give you some guidance, right? Like a mentor, in my opinion, is not going to tell you exactly what to do, because it's not for them to decide exactly what you need to do. Like you need to do the work, but they can really help guide you and make sure that if you're straying off the path, so to speak, that they can help get you some alignment, especially if they understand where you're trying to head, right? So you might not know the right things to try and focus on next, but they can say, hey, if this is your goal, we can try to direct you the right way.
All right. So, to end this segment, I'd like to know any success stories, any inspiring stories from your personal life that you felt like, yeah, damn, I'm really proud of myself. Any such stories? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think like I have I guess a double personal and work story to share. And it's not I won't go into like the details of it, but it's the same story for two individuals that I'm very proud of. So I
Okay.
had two individuals at the last company that I worked at that were incredible software engineers, absolutely amazing. And I managed these two software engineers, and they're not only extremely brilliant technically, but they're so easy to interact with as people. They're great mentors, great natural leaders. You can just see them when people talk about being a multiplier, like you can, by working with them, you really feel that they're bringing up everyone around them.
Nice.
And for these individuals, I remember in one-on-one conversations for career development, I remember asking like, are you like, do you have interest in managing teams? Because like you seem to have all of these characteristics and traits that I feel like make a really good engineering manager. Because I think one of the things that's a misconception with engineering management is that it's like it's just the natural progression from an engineer, you go to an engineering manager, but they're just completely different skill sets. So
Oh,
for these two individuals, they had both told me like completely separate conversations. No, like I'm happy to, to mentor the interns we have or new hires, but I I just like to focus on, the software development part. So I said, okay, like no worries, like we'll keep focusing on that. And sure enough, before I had left that company, one of them took an engineering manager position, is doing absolutely amazing at it. And after I left the company, the other individual also became an engineering manager. So the reason I'm really proud of that is because I feel like I identified these two people that were they're so in my opinion they're so well set to be engineering managers that they didn't even realize that they would be good at it and enjoy it, and now they're in this position and doing an amazing job.
yeah, that's amazing to have an eye to identify the real skill set. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, and I think they're doing a better job than I am, so I'm really proud of them.
That's how a mentor speaks.
That's right.
Right. And that brings us to the end of our chat on how to manage your time effectively as a software engineer. A big thanks to our awesome guest, Nick, for sharing stories from his personal experience and tips for effective time management. We'll be coming up with more such conversation on Zealous Talks with technology experts around the world. Till then, keep coding, keep innovating. This is your host, Kinjal, signing off.